Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcott. Stick around. Coming up later in the show, we're going to be joined by Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic. Of course, he is a reporter covering the Cincinnati Bengals every single day, has some great information. We're going to pose some great questions, providing we'll get some really tremendous answers. But first, let's think about Bet Online, because it is the number one source where you can bet on your favorite sports, whether it's NBA, whether it's NHL, whether it's WNBA, whether it's National Football League, every stat, every matchup, of course, even live odds while the games are still being played. And of course, all you got to do is go to the website, betonline.com. Of course, you can use the promo code Bleav, BLEAV, for 50% off of your bets. And of course, you can always get your information by going to Bet Online. It is where the game starts right here. I want to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals because we all know that this is one of those years where the Bengals are going to try to make a run to win a Super Bowl. It's sort of the quiet elephant in the room. That's right. The Cincinnati Bengals are Super Bowl contenders. And Hard Knocks is going to be chronicling the Cincinnati Bengals, particularly in season, as well as the other three teams inside of our division in the AFC North. Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, and the Cincinnati Bengals will all be appearing each week in the second half of the season and in the playoffs on the in-season version of Hard Knocks. And for me, that's where my concern comes in, because do you know, over the last 2 years, we haven't been that good inside the AFC North. Let's face it, the AFC North is by far the best division in all of football. In fact, over the last 4 years, 2020, 2021, 22, and 23, the AFC North has won more games than any other division in the National Football League. Twice during that 4-year run in 2020, as well as last year in 2023, the AFC North has sent 3 teams to the playoffs in the same season. And last year, the AFC North was the first division since 1932 to send every single team in the division to see them with a winning record. And the Cincinnati Bengals came in 4th place in the AFC North, despite having a winning record at 9-8. My biggest concern is we just haven't competed that well inside of the division over the last 2 years, where the Bengals have a record of 4-8 inside the AFC North over the last 2 seasons. Last year, the Bengals went 1-5 in their 6 games inside the AFC North. It took the final week of the season for the Bengals to get their one lone win inside of the division last year. And that came week 18 against the Cleveland Browns, who were starting their 5th quarterback of the season. Most of their starters didn't play because they had already clinched their seeding for the playoffs. So they gifted us a win. That's right. They gifted us a win. Do you know the Cleveland Browns have won 7 of their last 10 games against the Cincinnati Bengals, dating back over the last 5 seasons from 2019 through 2023. We've won 3 out of 10 games against the Cleveland Browns. That's right, the Cleveland Browns. It's not like the Browns are world beaters. That's my point here. So we have to begin to compete better inside of the best division in the National Football League. That's right. We've won it twice over the last 3 years. That's right. We are coming off back-to-back division championships going into the 2023 season. Now we go in 2024 having this conversation saying that we want the Bengals to compete better inside the AFC North division. I know that they will, but I think sometimes we got to say it if it's going to be manifested. Joining me is, of course, one of the best reporters covering the Cincinnati Bengals on the daily for The Athletic, Paul Dehner Jr., joining us on the show. Paul, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great, Solly. Thanks for having me on. Let's do this.
Oh, man, look, we got some hot questions teed up for you. And, of course, the first is that we got to kind of talk about what's happening around the National Football League, because we're hearing that the NFL owners want to kind of control sort of this inflationary rate that we're seeing quarterback salaries, at least for the elite ones. It seems like it's growing year over year. So what are they willing to do about it? And can they do anything about it?
I mean, isn't that the part at the end there? What can they do? I mean, I think it's great to say this. I think it's great to float it and whether I don't know if it's threaten. Would that be the right word to talk about with this?
Yeah.
Anything that talks about decreasing elite level salaries or trying to hem those in, where I just don't see it having legs when you get into a real negotiation in the CBA, which is still years out. I mean, where they don't get it, we're still talking a long ways down the road. And maybe the landscape will be a lot different at this point. But that feels like, man, the toothpaste is out the tube. I don't know how you bring those things back because you're having to convince quarterbacks to limit what they can do, even if it does benefit maybe the rest of the roster. That's asking a lot for any amount of money to come back when, let's be honest, you know what else is going to be part of that negotiation? They're probably going to be trying to get 18 games. They're going to be trying to get all kinds of other stuff. And that to me is something that ends up falling by the wayside as when it's just too far down the priority level for anybody to take it seriously, in my view. And granted, things change, but in my view, I don't think it could get done.
Well, you already know this. It's the owner's doing. Like, don't go blaming this on the quarterbacks like they're doing something that's untoward. They have to earn their entire life's earnings in a short span of time. Think about it. And that's what athletes are doing. And no athlete has to do that more than an NFL football player, right? They're trying to make as much money as they can in a short period of time. That's why the numbers are what they are. And it's been collectively bargained. And so any type of restrictions for what you're going to pay a quarterback has to also be collectively bargained. And we should also let listeners and our viewers know NFL owners can't call another owner and say, hey, guy, don't pay your guy so much so I don't have to pay my guy, because that's called collusion. You cannot do it. It is totally, let's just say this, you can't do it. It's against the law, and it's against their rules and regulations. And finally, I just want to say this and hear your thought. It's the NFL owner's fault. They're trying to compete for the best talent at that position. And so they don't have the discipline, right, to not overspend at the quarterback position. All you have to do is look at the Cleveland Browns and them going after Deshaun Watson and overpaying to get him. That kind of set us on this course, drastically taking us from about $40 million a year real quickly to right around $50 million a year.
Look, the market is the market. They're getting paid that because that's what it takes, because that's what matters. Like, if we were talking about running backs, you wouldn't be talking about them making this kind of money because it's not affecting the game. They've made every rule change over the last 15 years to augment the role of the quarterback to being the linchpin of all winning. That's how they have created and structured the on-field product. So don't get mad when the off-field cost is out of control for one player. Y'all did this by turning it. I know I don't have to convince the former defensive back of this argument, but by turning it into a quarterback's offensive game, you created this problem for yourself. Now go pay those guys.
We've been telling people all along, it's 53 guys on the team. You know, it takes 53 to win a Super Bowl. You do know that.
I don't know. You only need one good quarterback to win a Super Bowl anymore. It seems like and now that's why they make that. That's why they make that, because every year you have an elite quarterback or a quarterback on a rookie contract, and these are your Super Bowl participants.
Okay, now let's talk about the wide receivers, because we're seeing their salaries grow at an inflationary rate. Right now, we have 5 teams in the NFL that has not one receiver making over $20 million a year. They have 2 on the same roster making over $20 million a year, at least 5 teams now. And that number is going to increase as we continue to sign players and continue to sign the wide receivers who are putting up huge numbers. So I want you to tell me, Paul, why can't the Bengals keep both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins?
They can. They're choosing not to do so. And I mean, I think that is really, this whole conversation has been just blown so far out of proportion, because this is never really about dollars and cents. This is about philosophy. It's about paying the real number one, which nobody's debating that Jamar is the real number one. That's right. And not being willing to invest in a number 2, because who should be able to do that? Joe Burrow should be able to create, and playing alongside Burrow and Chase creates a number 2 if you can draft well. And guess what? There are a million good receivers that show up in the draft every year. I mean, look at what you got in the 6th round in Andre Yoshibach last year. Jermaine Burton in round 3 this year. You have to take advantage of that to offset the costs so that you can keep a defense, which, by the way, we saw in recent years. This is how the Bengals made the Super Bowl, was a well-rounded team where their defense is really, for the most part, what carried them to the Super Bowl and deep into the playoffs in 21 and 22. So that philosophy is, look, Burrow can make a second receiver. Trenton Irwin has looked great when he's had to fill in those spots. Guys look great when they have to fill in those spots. And look across the league. The amount of receivers, you mentioned all the ones making over 20. There's tons of them now.
Yeah, 21 to be exact. Yeah.
You know, not many make between 10 and 20. Because the number 2 secondary receiver has gone instinct, the middle class, right? Because people know they can develop a 2. You can find a 2. And so this is a philosophical decision, not a money decision. Now, there's money involved, and they're going to bicker over that and say, we tried. They didn't really. They're kind of going for it with the franchise tag this year with T. But this is more about willingness to invest in Burrow and Chase and develop the rest.
Yeah. I also want our viewers and listeners to know this. The Eagles are actually paying their quarterback over $50 million a year. They're paying their number 1 wide receiver, A.J. Brown, over $30 million a year. And their number 2 wide receiver, Devontae Smith, over $20 million a year. They have a $50 million quarterback, a $30 million receiver, and a $20 million receiver. So it can be done. And you don't have to say it's up to Joe Burrow to give back money so that the Bengals can pay their players. There is no industry that's operating where we take money from one employee and give it to another, and where the employee is doing it willfully. It just doesn't happen. So let's not ask our quarterback to start doing that. He's a quarterback, not the general manager. He doesn't have to help the team manage their money. Let's move on, because I love the interview that you did with Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. And you talked to him about what is going to be done to help this defense improve over the high volume of big plays they surrendered 1 year ago. To those questions, what did he have to say about that? And what do you see them doing to help this defense improve?
Everything. I mean, every single decision that they have made defensively, from personnel to scheme tweaks to reevaluating how they do things, has come back to those explosive plays. That was the difference. That was the difference really between the teams of the previous couple of years and this one. It was just these plays that just showed up over and over again. And they were mental miscues, not understanding how to pass off. And it's really a direct relation. And I think it's unfair how much the safety room has become the fall guy for this whole thing. It's way more than that. But that really started there. So what do you got now? Well, you got 2 new starters for right now. You know, Von Bell was brought in to help develop Jordan Battle, as well as potentially and currently be the starter. Geno Stone, who they felt was one of the smartest safeties on the market, who they saw outfox Joe Burrow famously in week 2 last year. And and hey, you can't beat him, join him. Get Geno Stone to come join you. They loved his intelligence, and they needed more of that. They needed more football savvy out there on the back end and communication. And Von Bell was a great communicator. Lou Anarumo said, you know, this wasn't about this being bad for Jordan Battle or disrespect. This is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to Jordan Battle. Jordan Battle didn't really have that player voice. Mike Thomas is a great person and leader to have in that room, but he was on the practice squad last year. It's different when it's a guy, you know, Sally, when it's a guy that's playing, that's showing you the way and doing it the right way. It's just different. And Von is that. And so they think that he's going to help Jordan Battle become everything they saw him starting to become last year. And they need more depth there. But it affected them moving Dax Hill, saying, look, let's try him somewhere else where these errors aren't going to be as much a part of the equation. Maybe he can play outside. They continue to invest in pass rush to try to get that part of it down too. And they're going to see Miles Murphy more, and they're going to have versatile pieces. All of that was about just getting the absolute miscue madness that went on over and over again to be not a part of the equation anymore.
You know, playing in a secondary, it's not about how many plays you make. It's about preventing big plays that you tend to give up. If you want to play winning football in an NFL secondary, just don't give up big plays. And sometimes you end up giving them up trying to make big plays yourself. And that's not an easy or trade-off that any defensive coach would love to have. They'd rather you limit the big plays. And of course, we want to see you make big plays, but not at the risk of giving them up. So I'm sure that's what they're shooting for. Let's move on here. We understand that the in-season version of Hard Knocks is going to be covering all 4 teams in the AFC North division. That means we're going to see more of Joe Burrow in season. A lot of cameras are going to be in the building and around the facility. You and I both know Cincinnati Bengals during the season, they try to lock down. They don't want to get that overexposure of their quarterback. You and I both know that firsthand. So how are they going to be able to manage this to keep it from becoming a distraction?
I think that it's easy for those cameras to fall into the background just because I think, to me, what I'm most interested in regards to Burrow and access and distraction is there a camera in the quarterback's room? We see that a lot in Hard Knocks, right? You have that camera in there and they get those conversations. We saw a lot of that last year with the Dolphins and Tua. You got to know him a little bit more and his personality through those. I mean, that's your real access that you get. Are they going to allow that? Is that camera going to exist in Joe Burrow's conversations with, Brad Cragthorpe and Jake Browning and everybody in that room, or him dropping into meetings with the receivers? How much of that is going to be allowed to see the light of day? Because that's kind of been a bit of the secret society, I think, that we really haven't gotten much of a taste of with Joe. Right. So much of his public persona has really been manicured and put to be very much manipulated to be, this is what we want to be out there. This is as much as we're willing. This is the piece of the pie that is willing to get. But he's just a focused, dialed in dude in season. Yes, he doesn't want a lot of that other stuff, whereas some other guys do. So that's all I'll be curious of is to see how much of that stuff is allowed to see the light of day, or does he just kind of stand there on day one with a football in his hand and zip, just knocks that camera in the corner right out of commission.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And we all know they're not getting anything after 8 o'clock, not once the season starts.
No,
right?
Bedtime.
The guy goes to bed at 8 o'clock every night during the season. That you're talking about discipline. Yeah. And he certainly understands the value of good night's sleep. And he's certainly right on that one. There is no doubt. One final question for you, because we were talking about the Hard Knocks covering the AFC North. The AFC North over the last 4 seasons has won more games than any other division in football. We've seen 3 of the teams go to the playoffs in the same year, in 2020 and again in 2023. The Bengals finished in 4th place last year, and they had a winning record. But for me, I want to see our team compete better inside of the AFC North. We finished 1-5 last year, and it took the Cleveland Browns maybe just sending some guys out there, their 5th quarterback starting in the season finale, for us to not get swept right within the division last year. How do you see us competing in 2024 inside of the AFC North? I would like to see us compete at a much higher level.
Yeah, and for them, they had been a little bit better before those last 2 years, but I really feel like they built a team, not necessarily built to win the AFC North, even though they did back-to-back years, but built to try to win a Super Bowl, more about competing with the Kansas Cities and some of these other teams, more wide open, less of the just going to win the bloodbath, right? We're just going to send out the 300-pound heavyweights and let's duke it out. They tried to play differently, and that has bitten them. I mean, last year it was the way teams just lined up and ran down their throats.
Great point.
Was really the concerning aspect, and I don't know that we've seen a big solve there this offseason in that regard. I mean, that's going to be a big question mark for me when they get into these AFC North games, is they can do that, because if they can't, it can very quickly go the way that it did last year. I think they just need to survive in the AFC North, because that's what can happen. I mean, it can just knock you out of commission. You can't go 1-5, but I think everybody's kind of going to go 3-3, because it's just going to be a bloodbath again. And then and then make hay elsewhere. I think where you feel like they've been able to prove that they can do that in the past.
Yeah. For me, the biggest concern is not at quarterback, because while we do have some great quarterbacks, whether it's Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, or Russell Wilson, I'm taking Joe Burrow any day of the week of the quarterbacks inside of the AFC North. But on the defensive side, the Pittsburgh Steelers rearming over there. They have one of the best pass rushers in TJ Watt. We know the Browns have, I think, a future Hall of Famer in Myles Garrett, the defending Defensive Player of the Year. TJ Watt won it the year before and could have won it twice, 2 years in a row. And we know the Baltimore Ravens play great defense. We'll have to see if they can transition after losing their coordinator from 1 year ago. But they have great defenses, and they can run the ball. Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, seems like they're loading up to be able to run the ball. They even got a quarterback in Justin Fields who can run the ball. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. But you're right. I think we're going to be tested in some different ways just inside of our own division, aren't we?
Yeah, it hasn't gotten easier. I think Baltimore might be a little overrated right now because we still have questions about Lamar Jackson being able to get through a full season. It's awesome that he did last year, but that was still an issue for him in years prior. And you hear a lot about Burrow's injury, and that's certainly a huge deal and how he's going to look. But Lamar still has to prove that he can do it year in and year out and continue to keep himself healthy, which he hasn't been able to do and sustain through his career. And they lost so many players and coaches. I mean, Mike McDonald and your top lieutenant on defense. Zach Orr is a really young first-time defensive coordinator. And you're putting a lot. We talked a lot about this last year with the Eagles losing both their coordinators and how would that affect. And that almost got Nick Sirianni fired right after being in the Super Bowl. Like, that is a really big deal to lose that level of coach on your staff and then in multiple spots plus players. I just think there's going to be a transition level there where people aren't really kind of counting on that as much as they should with Baltimore, but it's not easier. This division is going to be just as hard to win as it was last year because there's just too much talent, too much. And they've really, you talked about the North beating everybody.
Yeah.
They solved the league, and that is continuity. Stop firing your coaches every 2 years.
That's
Stop
right.
having so much urgency to go win. That starts with an ownership that is willing to not be what the Cleveland Browns were forever and invest in continuity, and the same people that you trusted to hire go out there and do it and build it year over year. And you have that across every single spot now that Cleveland has finally got on board and kept Kevin Stefanski. You think about it,
over the last 5 years, Lamar Jackson has twice won the MVP award in the National Football League. And over the last 4 years, Cleveland Brown coach Kevin Stefanski has twice won the AP Coach of the Year in the National Football League. The AFC North has got it cooking. Although we got to start getting some votes for our very own Zach Taylor, because I think he's done a great job in his early tenure as a Cincinnati Bengals head coach. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, covering the Cincinnati Bengals every single day. We thank you for your great work. Thank you for joining us right here on the Bleav in Bengal podcast. We look forward to having you on again sometime soon. But for now, enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll catch up with you in training camp, okay?
Thanks, Sally. Appreciate it.
All right, Paul, you're the best. Take care. All right, everyone. Hey, we want to thank you. It's been a great show. We want to thank Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic for providing some great answers to, I think, some really good questions to help us understand our team just a little bit better. We can't wait to head into training camp, right? We're getting excited about training camp starting this summer, mid to late July. I'm going to be over there watching the practices almost every single day because I can't wait to get a look at this football team. We want you to come over and join us on the days that fans are invited to watch practices. Let's make it an exciting day every single day for Cincinnati Bengals players while they're going through the doldrums of training camp this summer. Thank you for joining us, everyone. It's been great just really getting to talk football on another edition of the Bleav in Bengals podcast.